All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another session of the Fintech Firesides. My name is Professor Ishan Srivastav. I'm faculty at the School of Accounting and Financial Services at Seneca Polytechnic and the coordinator for Seneca Fintech. And with me are our co-hosts for today, Ed Johnson, and our guest for today, Suhas Pai. Edward is a seasoned tech leader with a dynamic career spanning corporate startups and consulting with a future-oriented and agile approach. Edward is passionate about driving innovation, fostering growth, and mentoring the next generation of professionals, all of you, in fintech and tech industries. He has extensive experience in fintech, capital markets, retail, cybersecurity, supply chain, and healthcare. He's also held Fortune 500 roles at Walmart, AIG, UBS, HP, and Allianz. So, without wasting any time, I'm going to hand the reins over to Edward. Um, we're going to keep the questions to the very end. Please put your questions in the chat. And once we're done with the session, I will be posting those questions further on towards Edward and Suhas. So, welcome again. I hope you have a great time. Edward, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ishan. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all having a good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the world and or in Toronto and around. So I'm going to be the host for this next little part here with Suhas Pai. I'd like to introduce Suhas. Um, he is a very experienced machine learning researcher. He has over a decade of experience in the tech industry, and he is a co-founder, a CTO, and ML research lead at Hudson Labs, which is actually a Y Combinator backed AI and fintech startup. And he primarily focuses on domain adaptive LLMs, text ranking, and representation learning. What is that? We're going to find out more during the session, of course, translate it into plain English. But one very important point is he is a recent author of an upcoming book, which is called Designing Large Language Model Applications. It's going to be published by the famous O'Reilly Media. And he's contributed to many development of relatively several open source LLMs, including being the co-head of the Privacy Group at Big Science, which is part of the Bloom LLM project. And he will say more about that. I actually met Suhas because he is and was very active in the machine learning community, being the chair of the Toronto Machine Learning Summit conference since 2021. And he's also a very frequent speaker. You will see him online at AI conferences worldwide, and he hosts regular seminars discussing research in the latest areas of NLP, natural language processing. So I'm happy to bring him in. Good morning, Suhas. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Edward. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks, Ishan, too.
Yeah, I just want to do a quick icebreaker, and I always do this with guests and ask what their favorite drinks are. So Suhas, my favorite drink is some espresso with a blob of milk, and cold drink it will be water. What about you?
Um, I'm going to disappoint all of you and say it's water.
Oh,
I actually, yeah, I like the way water tastes in different cities as you go, and I also like flavored water. So you can call me a water enthusiast.
wow, wow. Okay, well, that's going to be very good for anything to do with machine learning, I would say. So today, just to let everybody know, we're going to be talking about fintech. We'll start with a few definitions. We're going to go into some backgrounds. We'll find out a lot more about Suhas, what he does, why it's relevant to the world, and how he changes the world. And I hope you're all going to enjoy it. So first, let's start off with maybe Suhas, you can share how did you start your journey coming into AI and NLP?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually started sometime around 2009 when I was still an undergrad student. I was fascinated by search engines because, for the internet to realize its true potential with the ability to connect, the world together, search is a very critical function, the discovery part of it. And I was very deep into search engine technology. And one thing I noticed at that time was search engines are bottlenecked by understanding of human intent. So you can have, the best retrieval systems in the world, but if the search engine cannot understand the human request, there's not much you can do. And that made me interested in language, in natural language processing. And I moved in that direction, and slowly, the most promising techniques to facilitate language understanding, etc., were in AI. And I moved to the field of AI. And yeah, so that's how I got into the field. And yeah, ever since then, I think, because of the progress in AI, the vision that and the thing that I wanted to see in the world,
Yes.
having computers enable humans to understand each other better, I think that's coming into fruition more and more.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Maybe going on that, I mean, natural language processing, not sure if everybody knows exactly what that means, but we should maybe hit that and also another definition. And I put you on the spot and say, when somebody says fintech to you, what does that mean to you? Because this is a fintech cohort here.
Yeah. Oh, sure. So I guess fintech is just technical solutions to enable finance, it could be the movement of money, or it could be enabling financial institutions to do what they want, and so on. So you can see fintech companies operating in banking, in investment analysis, or things like blockchain and crypto, etc. So yeah, so that is like it's a very broad field.
Yeah.
And I think you also asked me about natural language processing. So
Yes.
natural language processing just refers to the set of computational techniques for processing language. And this includes natural language understanding, so making computers understand language, and also generating natural language generation.
Okay.
And yeah, which is enabling computers to generate language. And you have seen like recent developments in NLP have made things like ChatGPT, etc., possible.
Sure, and we're going to go into those a bit later. Um, but I'm going to come back to you again and just ask you, just because this is also a pragmatic course, people need to see themselves in the future. To ask you, and one of the questions I always want to know is, you're a CTO in your company. In short terms, what does a typical day look like if there is even one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it would look different for different stages of a startup. So to give some context, we are we have been in the game for 4 years now, almost 5 years. And so we are a small team with just around 10 people.
Okay.
And because of that, I guess I wear a lot more hats. So I do ML research, and I also do a bit of software development. I do project management, product management, people management, strategy, technical direction, and also representing the company at events and conferences. Also participate in things like user interface design. And yeah, so it's exciting because every day, it's like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get next. So every day it's like I don't know what will be my schedule on Monday, because it's
Uh,
not something that you can plan ahead. But it's exciting because you get to do so many things at the same time.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're doing everything, to be honest. There's a lot happening in there. So CTO, it's not only technical, there's far more than that. Let's I want to ask you a few things now to go now into the role of language models in fintech and in tech, basically. So maybe you could share a couple of cases, some kind of transformative use cases that you can see the technologies that you work on making a big impact.
Yeah. So the way I see language models and generative AI, and in general, the impact that they are going to have, or they are already having, is across the entire gamut of applications and workflows. So just like how a few decades ago we had this switch from paper to computer, from analog to digital, now
Yeah.
we are having this from non-AI to AI, and therefore AI is touching almost every single aspect of and a company's operations. So a lot of it is promised in the future, something that is either gradually or rapidly going to happen. But the use cases where we are already seeing a lot of traction, already seeing a lot of value being generated. One is in productivity enhancement. So if you are a financial analyst and there are already tools that helps you to search better, because if you are in the big data realm, you have to analyze a lot of data in order to understand whether to buy a stock or not.
Yes.
You now have AI tools that help you search for information better. You have AI tools that can synthesize from a large amount of data sources, summarize you the information, and so on. And you also have AI tools that can generate code for you. So if you are a financial analyst, but you are not a software programmer, you are no longer bottlenecked by your lack of programming language, because you can use AI tools that will generate code, do the analysis for you, and so on. So our customers, uh, for example, they have been using our tools since 2020, and when we started in 2020, there were not that many players in the AI space, but we bet on AI back then. And we saw our customers getting a lot of use from that already. Like, they were able to save time, and they were also able to get better decisions. And you can see that in so many, across the entire fintech sector. You can see it in hedge funds, uh, which have which are adopting AI at uh, you know very they are early adopters, you could say. A lot of them have been starting to use these AI tools for investment analysis, for and also just for general productivity and so on. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I mean, a lot of people got big exposure to LLMs and so when they started to see ChatGPT when that came out and that became not just an industry buzzword, but a word for everybody who has access to a computer. So there are some, I mean, we did hear about some problems at the beginning of hallucinations and sometimes the answers they come out, they're very authoritative, but they're slightly wrong and so on. So I know that there is newer technologies being looked at. I've got something here written called RAG, which sounds ragged, but it means retrieval augmented generation. Could you maybe talk about that and for a minute and tell us why that could be
Yeah.
exciting for people as we move forward?
Yes, that's a great question. So we see people, especially in finance, where data integrity, data accuracy is extremely important.
Yeah.
Getting the data wrong can be, $1 billion or several million dollars mistake. Therefore, initially there was a lot of hesitance in relying on AI tools. We can see there's still that hesitance, but what we are seeing is that companies are saying, okay, I know this is going to be wrong, but I'm going to have a fallback in case the AI, I'm not completely going to rely on the AI, etc.
Oh,
So the new technologies that, there are many different ways which you can reduce hallucinations, and there are many companies that are working on them. Regarding RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, it's part of this paradigm that is making AI models a lot more useful than they used to be, and it's opening up a large host of applications that were previously considered impossible. So what is a RAG? I would take a step back and talk about, LLMs or AI models. They used to be until very recently, they used to be these passive models that are part of a larger system. They have an input and an output. You've asked, and that was it. But now
Sorry,
they
do you mean
also,
when you say input and output, do you mean sort of like I ask a question, summarize me this document, and it gives
yes,
me an output, which is a
yes,
summarized document, something like that?
yes, yes,
Okay.
exactly. So you're gonna ask it something, it gives you something back. That's all. That's all. But now it there's this new paradigm where it's also not just a passive participant where it's just answering questions, but it can interface or interact with the environment around it. And that means that it can go and generate code and run code. It can go and retrieve data from data sources, and that's retrieval augmented generation, where it means that you connect a language model with some external data sources, and that data source can be anything like your company website, your internal documents. For Seneca, it could be, something like the university website and the documents, etc. And then
Research.
you
Yeah.
have the language model have access to that. And now the language model doesn't have to rely on its own internal memory and training when you are asking questions about Seneca College. It can refer to external data, get that, and use that data as a source to answer questions. So you can see that now the whole paradigm has shifted in such a way that these models are not just no longer just passive participants. They can interact with their environment in various ways. They can go and call different systems, get data from different systems, data sources, databases, and so on. So yeah,
Wow.
that's RAG.
Okay, I mean, if I were a student, I'd be a little bit excited about that, to be honest. Seeing AI not just responding to me, but also going off and maybe inventing some questions to ask to get some intelligent data back. That's good. Thank you for giving that example. I'm just thinking, we there are some of the things that come up about the AI systems, especially recently about the energy usage. And someone said each query that you make costs a certain amount of electricity, and so on. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about optimization, because I'm just thinking if you have a RAG type of system going off and doing whatever it likes, doesn't that have to be tempered a little bit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So before that, I just want to make a clarification. So for RAG, you don't necessarily need the language model itself to go and extract. So it can be the human giving the data source
Okay.
to the system as well. So, but yeah, going to energy sources. So you can see that Meta and Google and OpenAI, etc., the big companies, they are already talking about nuclear reactors and whatnot for their next generation of models. And I think energy is, in order for the planned AI revolution, because as you said, we are still at the very beginning of the whole
Yes.
AI revolution right now. The AI transformation that we are going through, we are still maybe, let's say, in chapter 1. And therefore, to prepare for like chapter 10, many of these big companies are talking about, nuclear and other data source energy sources, sorry. And I think right now the languages, it's LLMs, right? It's large language
Yeah,
models.
large language models,
These
yes.
language models are really very large. And but what we are seeing over time is that the to put it a little coarsely or crudely, the amount of intelligence per size is coming down. So that means that the a model that takes up, like, let's say 16 gigabytes of space today
Yeah.
is a lot more powerful than a model 2 years ago that would take 200 gigabytes of space. So we are seeing that the smaller models are getting better. And soon, the next wave that I see coming is models that are good enough, but still small enough that they can fit in your laptop or even your phone.
Wow.
Uh,
Really?
yes,
Okay.
we already have that, but
Right.
right now, the models that fit on your laptop are still, not as good as they still okay, but I would say that they are better than the chat GPT you had in 2022 when it first came out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because right now the expectations get elevated. I remember, when people got, were fascinated by what chat GPT was doing in November 2022 when it first came out. But if you use that November 22 version today, you would say, I don't want to use this. It's so terrible because our expectations have been elevated so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, just continuing on from that, we've noticed, and again, for everybody who is here, who knows the big names, the Facebooks or Meta, Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, they're all the big, big names. They're all spending billions, even hundreds of billions to generate and to create their models, run their models. I know they'll find problems bringing in money. So that's the MBA part. Now I'm just going into, let's go back. Now, I know that for every time you have a commercial software product, you also have what they call open source, which is free or limited way of using, cheaper. And I mean, for this course also, it's important to, look at the pros and cons. And I know that you, Suhas, have been involved also in the open source side of things. Perhaps you can say a little bit more about open source. Is it critical in the NLP space or not? And the for the innovation space, and maybe say a little bit about the pros and cons of open source compared to these huge corporations and their private models.
Yes. So open source models. So the open source research community uh, has been driving progress. So many of the innovations that we see that went into the making of a language model, and a language model is like hundreds of different. There are different components to the training of those models, etc. And many of those innovations actually came from the open source space. It's made up of people who are just in their free time collaborating with other scientists in the world and so on. So open source, what it gives you transparency. It gives you flexibility. Transparency is very important. So with open source, you know exactly what is going on. You can go and inspect the model and figure out why this model is behaving in this way. If you are using OpenAI, for example, it's mostly a black box system. You can't peer inside of it. You are just going to get a response. You pass, you ask a question, it gives you a response. You have no idea of what is going on inside it. Open source, it gives you the transparency. It also gives you the flexibility because you can take that code, you can change something, and you can create your own version of it, and so on. So I think those advantages there are pretty significant. One thing that I like to mention, and you said cheap. Open source is not necessarily cheaper. So, and
Oh,
I'll tell you, especially right now. So one thing to note is that, okay, so we have these models, but then they are open source. So that means the models themselves are free. You can download them.
yeah.
But then these models are large at this moment. So that means if you have to run them, they have to be deployed on some servers. And those servers cost you money.
Ah,
And
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
as of today, um, and the other part about it is that in order to make uh, the process of running it more efficient, there are a lot of inference optimization techniques, which the big tech companies have kind of perfected. So that means that they are able to serve those models and because they are doing it at scale, they could do it
Yes.
even cheaper. And it's not always the case that open source models are going to be strictly cheaper than closed source ones. I mean, and it doesn't also mean that proprietary models are cheaper than open source. So I think it depends on that particular situation. And yeah, so that's the other thing about open source is it's a spectrum, because there's also an argument in the community about what is truly open source. Is it open source if you just have the model available, or you also need the code to reproduce the model by
Yeah.
yourself if you need to? There is also an argument that the data that was used should also be revealed. The data used to train the model should also be revealed. On the other hand, putting that data out there is a little risky for open source organizations who usually do not have legal, they don't have paid lawyers working for them, because
Oh,
many of
right.
these
Yeah.
data sets have copyright implications.
Yeah.
We don't know yet whether this data is that, because the data is usually just crawled from the internet, and some of the internet text is copyrighted. And yeah, we don't know, and this is actively being litigated in court as we speak, whether those copyrighted data, should they be compensated, or should they be left out of training data sets, etc. So yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, there's a lot of I mean, as we move forward, I on my spare time, I also I also do some photography. I'm not very good, but I do know a lot of photography people who make money with their photography. And on their side, they are running into copyright issues, ownership issues, whether their photos have been used inside of models, AI
Yes.
models, or partly used. It's there's a lot going on, and that actually brings me round to a point which I also wanted to ask about, ethics, which is often one of the last things that when people do business courses, there's always a little bit of ethics in there, but sometimes the emphasis is not high enough, as far as I'm concerned. So, what I wanted to ask you a bit more about is, maybe if we can talk a little bit about AI ethics. You know, how organizations, how does your organization even ensure that you're doing things ethically, the data is being processed ethically, and how you do that on an ongoing way, especially in
Yes.
in the case that we have more and more LLMs and they're more powerful.
Yes. That's a great question.
Thank
I
you.
think
I'm only asking great questions
yeah.
today.
No, I think it's a question that is still being debated, because we are still, the community as a whole is still figuring out what is right and what is wrong. And for example, the copyright issue. So in US law, and there's this fair use, clause, where if you're certain kinds of usage is fair use. And we can say that, okay, every website out there is public, like the people put out their information publicly, and it's meant for everyone to view. So it should probably be okay for a search engine to crawl that data, which has already been happening by
Yeah.
Google, etc., for the last few decades. And now AI companies are using to crawl the data for their training data sets. So there's some a proportion of the community thinks that it's fair use. A portion of the community says no, there are companies that are profiting off that data. So that means the data creators, or at least the platform creators, should be compensated. And we have seen recently, there are websites like Reddit, etc. They are penning deals with OpenAI for millions of dollars, than selling access to their data.
Oh,
So you have companies like Reddit who are able to monetize, and that is user data. That is, users are posting on Reddit, but Reddit is monetizing it. And the question then remains, whether a person who is a blogger, who has a prolific blog, and would they be able to do something similar? How would they be able to prevent their data from being used, or do they have any say in that matter? So all those are like very fluid questions. The other thing, I guess, that's also being spoken about is bias. And
Yeah.
the question, and there are people like, oh, AI should be politically unbiased. But then how do you define what is politically unbiased? If you ask ChatGPT today, who should I vote for, Trump or Kamala Harris, and it gives you an answer. What
Does
constitutes
it
an
give you an
unbiased?
answer? I didn't even attempt to try that. Did it give an answer?
I think I haven't tried it, but I've seen people post on Twitter that
Okay.
sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
All right.
And different models behave in different ways. But the the question here is what constitutes an unbiased answer? Would that be like giving both of them like 50-50 and saying, oh, I don't know? Or,
Yeah.
there's so many aspects to that. And the other question is, what if you can't be biased because the world is too complex, so there has to be some bias embedded in, whose bias do you implement? Whether it is a Western-centric bias that is present in the data sets that the data is trained in, or the biases of the companies that are training those models, the employees, because the employees are the one doing the data cleaning and the post-training, etc., which is affecting the behavior of the model. So I think that's again so there is this question, should language models model accurately the world that they live in, or should
Yeah.
we model language models for the world we want it to be? The latter is a very idealistic position where we imagine a world that doesn't have all the world problems that the current world has, and we want the language model to be like that guiding oracle. And the other part of the debate is that, oh, maybe it should exactly be just like it should just reflect the world as it is. And I think it is, again, it's very difficult to debate these issues because there are so many different points of view.
Yeah.
And I think as we go forward, things will become a lot more clearer. There'll be more moral clarity, legal clarity, etc.
I think I have the feeling we need a lot more philosophers in the AI game, and as not just legal
Yeah.
people, but some
Yes.
philosophers,
Uh,
some social people as well, who
yes.
actually can say something early, rather than after everything has been developed, the
Yes.
models and so on.
Yes. Incidentally, OpenAI and Anthropic hired philosophers who do that kind of work.
Excellent, excellent. But we didn't get the answer to your question. What do you do at your company? In short, just a short version. What do you do in your company concerning avoiding bias, or at least being aware and controlling bias and the ethics? What do you all do?
Yeah. So for us, because we are a fintech company, um, we so there's one thing so far, and this will change because we are going to have a new product coming soon. But so far, we don't allow our customers to interact directly with our models,
Oh, okay.
and that basically removes a lot of those risk points
Yes.
because now we are in charge of the model. We only interact it in very constricted environments, and we don't ask for financial advice or anything like that. We use it only for very constrained use cases. And that's how we currently manage that. And also, we don't handle customer data at all. So we don't accept any forms of customer data. So we don't have to worry about privacy because no external data is being used. No, sorry, no non-public data is currently being used. That will change as we launch a different product soon. But yeah, that's how
Yeah.
we managed
Yeah,
privacy, etc.
I understood that, and maybe for everybody here. So, one of the challenges of things like ChatGPT and and other products is they allow you to try so many different things. And if you do a contrast with, if or any of you who drive a car, there's only a few ways you can drive a car. You have a steering wheel and a couple of pedals. You can't do anything else for driving the car. And ChatGPT would, if you do a comparison, it would be like having 500 pedals and 50 steering wheels. There are so many ways in. So I understand your approach, Suhas, where you basically limit so many different aspects so that ethically you can't
Yes.
even get in touch with data and so on and so forth.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
that's uh, that's good. So I want to just now for everybody who is here is also thinking of and we would thinking about entrepreneurship, perhaps maybe thinking about a corporate. But I want to talk to you now, Suhas, about the entrepreneurial aspects of AI and fintech. And I'd start off by asking you, what do you think are the biggest challenges, maybe the rewards that you're having with building Hudson Labs in a very competitive space?
So for entrepreneurship, regardless of whether it's an AI company or not, I think the biggest challenge remains um, building things that people want. Building things that is a need to have and not a nice to have. Um, and that is probably the biggest challenge facing any startup. It's easy to go to one customer and say, okay, here's your problem, I'm going to solve it. But then you realize that the next customer has a totally different set of needs. And soon you are now a consulting business rather than a AI product. So you need to figure out what can I build that's going to benefit a large market, and what can I build that the product boundaries are defined in such a way that a large number of different institutions can make use of it at the same time. And figuring out again, it's very hard to figure out what people need, because it's not as simple as, hey, doing user interviews and asking, hey, what do you need? Because stated preferences are not always the same as actual preferences. I might say, hey, I need this great, Zoom summarization tool, where it summarizes the meetings, the Zoom meetings. And I would say yes. And then maybe Zoom goes and implements it. And maybe I would say, yeah, after trying it, I'm like, yeah, sure, this is good, but I don't feel like paying for it.
Yeah.
And usually whether you would like to pay for something, for some service or not, is not something that customers, and that includes me too. I notice myself doing that. It's not something we can say beforehand, whether we would pay something for it. So that's a big challenge. I think you also asked about rewards. So I think
Yes.
rewards entrepreneurship, the rewards far, far outweigh the challenges. First of all, so there is small businesses, and then there is startups, and I'll talk about startups.
Yes.
Startups are specifically meant, it's like a go big or go home kind of thing, right? So there's no one who starts a startup and says, okay, we are going to remain this business doing 600K a year for the next 20 years. It's always like, I'm going to do something that is going to impact the world, and it's an opportunity to redraw the world in your vision. So you can set up a vision for what the world needs to be, and use your startup to push the world in that direction. And we have seen all the world's biggest startups do that. They push the world in a particular direction. Airbnb, it changed human behavior. It changed the way people, travel. Same with Uber, same with Netflix. Um, you know, it caused a true behavioral change or a lifestyle change in humans. Similarly, and not every startup needs to be, that, but every startup does have like this vision, um, and along with a set of behaviors that they hope to influence people that makes the world a better place, at least in their eyes.
Yeah,
And just
yeah.
working in service of that is really very rewarding, just from a self-actualization point of view, just selfishly speaking, that part. And also, if you actually end up changing the world, if you actually end up bringing in a lot of benefits to society, that's also a great thing. And of course, there are startups that also cause a lot of harm. And that's also something that people need to be very concerned about, all the negative externalities that might come from your startup becoming bigger, etc.
Yeah, scale, scale, scale. I think I'm going to no, that's really good because it's giving more of a realistic view of startups. I mean, it's not just glamour and so on. There's also a lot of hardship that goes with it. Um, I think I'm just looking at the time just to make sure that we're going to pick up on the things that are very important. I would say I've got my questions listed. That's why I keep looking over here. I'm just thinking about collaborations between startups and enterprise. And I say that because I know that a lot of large companies, I mean, I've worked in one very recently, Walmart, for instance. When I was in Walmart, there was a company from the UK which they actually bought the startup because that startup was very good at analyzing what was on the shelves in a supermarket and who was buying it. So instead of Walmart developing in that in-house, they bought the whole company and tried to integrate that company in. And there were some clashes of culture, but they did that. And it is something that I think I'm not saying anything secret. This is what all the other supermarkets will do. So what about you? Maybe you could say something a bit about collaboration between large enterprises and startups, and then this kind of push-pull that's in there
Yeah.
and culture.
Yes. Yes, it's also always a very interesting, relationship, because startups usually get in the game uh, to usurp those large enterprises, with the hope that they can. Sometimes, large enterprises are, so there are large enterprises who can be customers, but they can also be large enterprises who are competitors in the space. In case of a competitor, sometimes the outcome is that you get acquired by the competitor, and maybe your startup, you are able to make your investors happy, get a large return for yourself, and then go on and do another startup with the returns that you got. There's also the case that maybe the the startup grows to become as large as that enterprise, and then they can challenge each other. Or in some unfortunate cases, the enterprises can do hostile takeovers, or um, you know bog the startup down in legal challenges. So there's a lot of things that can happen out there with customers. Large enterprises, I think those are they can be synergistic. There's a lot of opportunity for that. But I think w- the the way that um, startups operate. So you can be a B2B, or you can be a B2C, and when in B2B businesses, um, getting inside the door of large enterprises, even if the door is like slightly ajar, is
Yeah,
so beneficial, because once you get in, then you can make inroads slowly and steadily. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I want to ask you, which is probably a question, it's a classic question. Um, you talking to your previous you, maybe a younger version of you, maybe 10, let's say 10, 15 years ago. The world was very different 15 years ago. What would you
Mhm.
tell a younger you, who maybe a younger you who still loves tech and so on, maybe has some eyes on the world? What would you be telling a younger you about how the world is going to be and how they should prepare? And then I'm going to push the question now to you for the going forward. But let's do the one looking back. What would you tell the younger version of you? Let's say 10 years ago.
Yeah. Um, I think For yeah, so I can answer it from a personal aspect and also from the world in general.
Please do
Um,
both. Yes, yes.
yes. So from a personal aspect, from the aspect of entrepreneurship, I would say entrepreneurship, building startups, because we are a deep tech startup. Even a deep tech startup, it's just not about tech. It's just not about building cool models and new techniques and whatnot. Everything else, marketing, distribution, talking to customers, um, pricing models, etc., are all part of that picture. And paying attention, and those oftentimes can be much more difficult than the deep tech itself. Like you can be a researcher, sit inside a room and come up with fantastic models, but no one is going to use them if you don't have the rest of the startup built in. And I guess people who are getting into entrepreneurship should be prepared for all of that. And it's not just one or two things. It's not just about being good at one or two things. It's about being good enough at 30 different things. And that's
Yeah.
what entrepreneurship is about. Like no one needs you to be the topmost X in a particular sector. It's all about being good enough, the jack of all trades, basically. From a general perspective, I think the world of AI, I would say that, okay, so in 2012, I actually left the field of AI for a few years. I went to work in information security. And I left the field of AI back then because AI was stagnating. There were a lot of things that I wanted to do, but couldn't do because the tech just wasn't mature enough. I couldn't see a future there, and I decided to switch my field. And it was around 2012, 2013, right after I switched, a new hope, the deep learning revolution started in Toronto, pioneered in this city, and it took a while for things to look promising again. But yeah, I would be like, never say never. Just because and I think we might hit no one can predict the future. It's possible that AI might hit a wall soon again.
You
But
think so?
then
Really?
anything is possible. So I think with the current tech we have, even if we hit a wall, we have at least 10 years
Yeah.
to build stuff on the things that are already been developed. So we
Oh,
won't
okay.
feel the wall, even if there is a wall, we won't feel it for a long time to come. But
Okay.
even if a wall comes, I would say it doesn't mean it's always comes in waves. There is always a winter and a summer. So and nothing is permanent. I think that would be, yeah.
Okay. So, you did mention something to do with, I'll put it this way, being able to do everything, not well, but well enough. Maybe a few things that you can do pretty good. That's good. That's good advice for people who maybe want to be entrepreneurs. And I would say also for people who are going into corporates, you can also cultivate entrepreneur mindset while you're inside. They call that an intrapreneur. So I think that's also quite useful. So maybe just to ask a little bit more, and this will be the final for this stage, I think, Ishan, to really think about LLMs and the future. Let's say the next 5 years. Can you give a couple of use cases that you can really see coming up? I mean, maybe 5 years is too long, but practical things that people can say, from this meeting, I remember that
Yes.
Suhas said this is going to happen in the future.
Yes, I think there are two trends that are pretty clear. One is agents, LLM-driven agents. And agents are, the paradigm that I talked about, RAG is very closely associated with it. agents are LLM-based systems that can interact with their environment and perform tasks autonomously. So that means you ask an LLM, go give me an answer to this question, and the LLM might say, okay, in order to answer this question, maybe I need to extract data from this source. Maybe I need to generate some code. Maybe I need to connect to this system and get some answers, and then I'm going to give it to you. And it's all doing it autonomously. No one told it that you need to do this step A, step B, step C. And we'll see that being operationalized a lot more everywhere. So I think it would be like, a lot of automation that you see. Our things getting a lot more automated. So for example, ability, and they are already working on this right now, ability to automatically book flights when an agent can go and act like a assistant to you, set up calendar meetings, book flights, etc. So that's one, and we'll see agents being installed on our phone, on our laptops. Microsoft, Apple, etc. will be coming with that soon. They already have rudimentary versions of that. I think Microsoft has Copilot on Windows,
Yeah.
and Apple has something else too. So I think all of those will be even more powerful. The next trend I would see happening is on-device LLMs or on-device models that are very powerful that can be part of your laptop, and it's just like any other software in your laptop or on your phone. And that means it will be free intelligence. The cost of intelligence is dropping down to zero. You no longer need to pay OpenAI. You just pay for the price of your laptop or your phone to get your hardware upgraded to so that it can run those models. But the price of intelligence is going to drop down to zero soon. So yeah, I think those are the two trends that I see coming in the next 5 years. The one thing that I would like to mention again, I guess, is the caveat is that I feel like a lot of these technologies are going to be a little, in many use cases, they will be a little like self-driving cars. So self-driving cars, we had 99% of them. So 99% of the tech or the capabilities of self-driving cars have been there for a decade at least, or not a decade, maybe 6-7 years. And the last 1% is the difficult part. And that's what makes it, that's why we don't see self-driving cars everywhere in the world. And we see it only in some specific areas. Similarly, I think agents will run into that problem where that last 1-2% of reliability will block it from being used in every single use case. But there are still a lot of use cases where you can be okay with it failing 1% of the time. And that's where we'll see the impact.
Interesting, interesting. I'm sure everybody's had the experience of having to call an institution and they have to go through the voice channels, or if they've gone through a chat bot online and the chat bot reaches its limit, it can't answer your question and it doesn't know how to send you to a human agent and so on. So yeah, this extra 1, 2, 3, 4% is there. Okay,
And
so
yeah.
yeah.
Please.
So I'm going to hand over to you, Ishan, if it's the right time now. And if not, I do have other questions.
No, I think we are running rather close to the end. So if anyone has any questions, please do put them up in the chat. Failing that, Suhas and Edward, actually, I do have a question for both of you. But
Okay.
Edward, continue for the moment, please.
Okay, so we do have some students. Obviously, there are students here. I would like to ask you, if you're a student and you want to accelerate into this situation, LLMs and other things, what's the best way to get going on that?
I think it's just using them and developing an intuition on their strengths and weaknesses. So if you're from a non-technical background and you want to get into LLMs, just using it and trying it for all kinds of even outlandish ways and figuring out, because you are going to get a response for whatever input you're given. It's just you need to notice what kind of response it gives. And based on that, you will slowly develop a intuition about the strengths, the limitations, its behavior. Try a lot of different models in different situations. And that gives you, even without knowing what is underneath, etc., it gives you an idea of how models behave and what is possible or not. So yeah, I think that I would. But if you want to get into the technical space a little more, I think I would suggest mm, just following the landscape through either like books or newsletters, etc., being in contact with that, and then slowly, looking at tutorials on the web, just trying to get yourself a open source model working on your laptop, and just setting that up, etc., is a good way. My book, which is actually coming out in February, is meant for among one of the audiences that it's meant to capture is people who are don't necessarily have a strong tech background, but need to get into LLMs. So that's
Yeah. Yeah. That's there. I saw a couple of things pop up on the chat. I don't know if are we supposed to take those, Ishan, or?
Yeah, I think we can. We have a question from Rowena for Suhas. She asks, what are your company's green options on implementations on sustainability and low carbon initiatives in terms of AI implementations?
Yeah. So our company, we are pretty small at this moment, and because we don't really run our models in-house. We run them on cloud services, and those cloud services have their own sustainability initiatives, etc., for that. I do know that there's ESG is a big thing in finance, and there are companies who are invested in ESG investing, so they want to track and we have had customers who are interested in greenwashing, in detecting greenwashing, where companies try to pretend that they are doing something, environmentally friendly, but in essence, they are not really doing it. And then you can use AI to detect greenwashing, etc. So we did look into the space, a few years back, but I think that it's a very difficult problem to solve. Especially because there's very little disclosure. There's very little tangible disclosure on that.
Yeah, that's true. I want to just say something about the second question. I hope that first question was answered, but just on the second question that someone said, I've been reading in Reddit that there are people using ChatGPT as their therapist, advisor, etc. What do you think of this? Is ChatGPT reliable enough to do that?
Yeah.
I have an answer, but would you like to answer that one, Suhas?
Yes. So I think there are instances where the models have provoked a person into killing themselves, and there are also instances where models have acted as a therapist, and people have found meaning in it. So it really, I think it depends on the human and not as much on the model, because the human is also somewhat projecting their hopes and feelings on the model. But what I have been observing is that the generation that comes after my generation, like I would say Gen Alpha and not Gen Z, are the first AI native generation. And I see them using websites like Character AI a lot. And I do find that trend to be a little disturbing, because if you notice what is happening in those forums, etc., there are people who are, I would say, getting more and more isolated from society, because you have Character AI. If people don't know, you can have these different AI characters that you can customize. So you can have a customized like girlfriend or a boyfriend who you can customize their behavior to behave in certain ways. And people find a lot of solace in characters who are never going to argue with you, who are never going to fight with you, and it can give you some kind of a false sense of security. And I don't know, if people because this Gen Alpha generation is slowly growing, I don't know what will happen to them as they grow. Is this just a phase, or is this something that is changing society forever? It's hard to tell. But I think if I have to talk about like the biggest risk from AI, there are many people who talk about existential risk, like robots getting sentience and killing us all, etc. But I personally think the biggest risk is in the social compartment, where people find AI to be a lot more, something that they can get along with better than humans, and isolating them from society.
I mean, there is always that possibility. There will always be people in society that will get on better with other entities. I can pick out, for instance, there are some people who prefer pets, dogs than their cats to humans. I'll extend that to aspects of AI. AI is going to get better. There's no doubt about it. Much, much better over time. So there will be people who will trust more and more and more. And especially as we see how the media world has gone as well. There are more sources of media now than maybe 30 years ago. And people have to decide what they trust and prefer over the time, for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, okay, we've gone pretty deep just there. Um, but coming back to, I have one more question, which is really about and I've noticed it's very easy to get either confused or very deep into the tech. And there are a lot of people out there who are maybe intimidated with all the terminology and everything else. I know that people can learn, but for instance, can someone who is an accountant or someone who is, let's say, an accountant who wants to do more with the new tools that are available, how can they do that in a safe way that makes them feel comfortable?
Yeah, that's great question to end the session. So I think there are two ways right now. One is because AI has brought down the technical barriers that used to exist, they can get started on general purpose AI and make it work for their use case. They can, play around with ChatGPT or other tools and see if it can help them in their profession in some way to make them more productive, to offload their drudgery of work, etc. The other way that could happen is, there are companies popping up all around who are building these solutions that are very specific to these professions, all the different professions. So there's an AI company for law, AI company for accountants, AI company for radiologists, and so on. And then you can just go and use those companies who have already put in that thought about how we can steer this AI in a way that can be helpful to accountants and use those tools. So I think those are like two ways in which one can use these, one can adopt this new technology. I think it's also not a problem if people are, I'm going to take a break, or I'm going to be a little skeptical now, and maybe I'll wait. Because in the end, it's not like if you don't, and I'll give you a anecdote to end this. So I interact with one of those big AI companies that we have heard of, who have produced one of these models that hundreds of millions of people use.
Yeah.
And as a company to company relationship, when we interact with them, you would assume that because they are this big AI company that has developed all these great models, they would have a lot of their business processes automated. But instead, getting in touch with them is through a manual Google form and it is manually checked by a human being. Even though you can see there are tools available that use that model that they built to automate reading Google Forms or reading it. So
Wow.
creators of the models themselves haven't, and it's the same, like, there are a lot of people who still don't use Microsoft Excel, even though they need to. I use Google Docs for everything, even though there are tools like Notion. So I think it's okay if, you don't feel like adopting these, because, life will go on, and it's not like you will. And there are people who would say, oh, if you don't use AI, you'll just, you'll just fall behind.
That's being said quite a lot in the media, which is kind of, for some people, is kind of scary. If
Yeah.
you don't use AI now, you will be replaced by somebody who is using AI, which I think is scaremongering, but it's out there.
Yes, yes. I think it is true to some extent. It's true. I would put it in another way. If you use AI, you will have a big advantage. Does it imply that if you do not use AI, you have a big disadvantage? Not really, because you can compensate through other means, but
Yeah.
it's probably better to use AI than not.
Okay. So for those who will be looking for jobs, it's important to at least invest yourself a bit and keep up. Yeah.
Yes, I think definitely someone who is able to use these AI tools, especially if you are going to a job, to a company where no one else knows to use AI, you will
Yeah.
suddenly be, the star of the team, and people will all be, hey, and I know some friends for whom this has happened. So they are like the only person in the team that knows to use AI, and suddenly they are elevated in their company. And yeah.
That's great news. That's good to hear. Okay, that's very positive. Okay, Ishan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Edward. Suhas, you're absolutely right. Everyone needs to get in on the game at the moment and learn how to use AI, because it is going to become a major part of the economy in the future. Sam Altman, a few months ago, I think, in an interview, he made a speculation that with time, as access to AI becomes more democratized, people will eventually have their own GPTs that would be trained essentially to think like them, to act in their stead. And this will be the distinguishing factor in individual value propositions. So people will say, this is my GPT, the way they say, this is my trading algorithm. At a basic level, it'll answer your emails automatically. You wouldn't have to do that by yourself. But at a higher level, it could essentially do your entire job for you. And we as humans will be reduced to pretty much rubber stamps. We'll approve of whatever the tasks, the actions that the GPT has done. And in worst cases, we'll take the legal liability for those actions. So it is time to get in on the game, without a doubt. But Suhas, thank you so much. This has been an extremely illuminating talk. Edward, thank you so much for hosting. You asked the perfect questions.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask Sarah if you could step in for a moment. And there's our chair, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, good morning. I was listening in. I just want to thank the whole audience for being here. It's so great to see this kind of turnout from our community, and on a Saturday morning, no less, right? Edward and Suhas, on behalf of our FinTech Graduate Certificate Program, our students and staff at the School of Accounting and Financial Services, and our Faculty of Business at Seneca Polytechnic, I just want to sincerely thank you for your time this morning. Edward, for facilitating such an engaging and very accessible conversation for us. And beyond that, just for being such a great supporter and advisor to our program at Seneca. And Suhas, thank you so much for sharing all of that industry expertise, using all of those real world examples. I think we're all leaving here feeling a little bit less intimidated, a little bit more career ready than ever to tackle some of those challenges and opportunities that you mentioned, the interdisciplinary ones, the entrepreneurial ones, the ethical ones, especially. And so thank you both. We're so grateful for your lending your industry expertise this morning. sharing, and we look forward to and really hope that you'll join us again soon. And finally, a huge thank you to our professor and program coordinator, Ishan, for organizing this session and for organizing this entire series. It's such a great opportunity to learn. It's a great opportunity for us to engage as students and fintech enthusiasts with some of these questions. So we're so grateful to you, Ishan, as well.
Thank you all. Suhas and Edward, would you be amenable if our students add you on LinkedIn and connect with you there?
Absolutely, no problem.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And would
yeah.
you also mind hiring them?
If I have an opening in my small company, I'd be happy to hire very positive, hardworking people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We will have another session in 2 weeks' time. Until then, take care of yourself, stay safe, and well, keep chumming on.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Great.